All right, so we got some bizarre Tommy Tuberville news. This guy, good Lord. So I have a clip that I want to that I think helps frame this conversation that we can get into in a second. But can you set up the fight that he's currently having with the military? Because I think that is also some type of playing into this somehow.
Yes. So Tommy Tuberville has establishment Republicans extremely upset. He has the Biden administration extremely upset because he's been blocking senior military promotions that are confirmed in the Senate over the Pentagon's abortion policy, which is they will pay for their employees to travel for abortions. And so Tuberville has, for a very long time, said, we are blocking these promotions. I'm not going to allow them to go through as the Senate works. You can have one person sort of gumming up the works like that. And his argument is that the Biden administration could drop this policy. Like, they don't have to be funding abortion travel. So if they are clinging to this idea that they're going to be paying for abortion travel at the Department of Defense with taxpayer money, why are you blaming me? Why are you not blaming the Biden administration? And the head of the Marines was forced into retirement this week. I saw forced into retirement. I don't know what the circumstances are between going into, I think it had something to do with, like, it was nothing like super interesting or nefarious, but retired this week, and they needed to appoint someone to that position. And so that's where this is all coming to a head this week, because people are really frustrated that they can't name a new head of the Marines while Tuberville continues to block this. He says, it's not me, it's the Biden administration. Conservative movement is rallying behind Tuberville. Mitch McConnell, John Thune are not. They are really, really upset about it. And again, this is all coming to a head. And now that sets up the Tuberville CNN drama.
And to me, it seems like if Tuberville or any other senator wants to unilaterally kind of set policy, that kind of intricate policy for the military, they should run for president and become commander-in-chief. To me, it's like, come on, get out of here. Like, this is not how we run a military. But anyway, so to the white nationalism question that he has now gotten himself tangled up in, I wanted to play one clip of him. This is from October of 2022. This is at a Trump rally, which I think puts into context some of the comments that he made recently.
The Democratic Party, they have a majority. They could stop this crime today. Some people say, well, they're soft on crime. No, they're not soft on crime. They're pro-crime. They want crime. They want crime because they want to take over what you got. They want to control what you have. They want reparation because they think the people that do the crime are owed that. They are not owed that.
All right, so here, listen to that as context for a recent conversation he had on a podcast where he said, some people call them white nationalists, I call them Americans. So he then goes on CNN, where Caitlin Collins presses him. Hey, you said this pretty crazy thing. Can you please kind of elaborate? What did you mean by this? And here he is on CNN.
That's not identity politics. You said a white nationalist is an American.
It is identity politics.
You said a white nationalist is an American, but a white nationalist is someone who believes horrific things. Do you really think that's someone who should be serving in the military?
Well, that's just a name that has been given. I mean,
it's not. It's a real definition. There's real concerns about extremism.
So if you're going to do away with most white people in this country out of the military, we got huge problems.
It's not. Huge problems. It's not people who are white. It's white nationalists
that have a few probably different beliefs.
Right?
That have different beliefs. Now, if racism is one of those beliefs, I'm totally against it. I am totally against racism.
But
there's a lot of people that believe in different things.
Is racist, Senator?
Well, that's your opinion. That's your opinion. But if it's racism, I'm totally against it. I am totally against any type of race, or any type of racism. I don't care what it's in.
So he's okay with white nationalism as long as it doesn't involve racism.
It's so bad. It's so bad.
So bad. Mitch McConnell got pressed on it at the Sticks yesterday on Capitol Hill. Here's Mitch McConnell grappling with this question.
Do you have any concerns that you have a member of your conference, Senator Tommy, seems to have a hard time denouncing white nationalism, especially as it pertains to white nationalism in the military?
You know, white supremacy is simply unacceptable in the military and in our whole country.
Get him, Mitch.
Yeah. And so I saw Eric Erickson saying, Tommy Tuberville is the hero we need, talking about his fight with the military right now. So how is this just horrifying moment of racism from Tuberville colliding and coinciding with this kind of stand he's taking with the kind of evangelical movement to support their kind of preferred abortion policy in the military. Is it causing consternation that, oh boy, like in order to, like, or are these things mingling together? What's going on the right as people have to grapple with this guy's refusal to say to just denounce white nationalism?
I think it's an attempt, and I would imagine coordinated on Capitol Hill, to undercut his credibility. And if you can undercut his sort of moral credibility, then do you have the conservative movement?
Like maybe somebody leaked that podcast?
Someone, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised by that. It could have
which
been,
then brought him on to CNN, and then he refused to just put it out by apologizing.
and Mitch McConnell and John Thune have, or McConnell at least, you've seen that there, have taken the opportunity to jump in. But I would say this is actually kind of interesting. Some people might think this is a charitable read on Tuberville, but I think it is not charitable. I think it's the least charitable read on him. I genuinely think that he is trying to push back on this definition inflation in a way that this is not defensible, and that's my point. He genuinely doesn't understand that white nationalism is inherently racist. He actually thinks that it's just a label Democrats are throwing around because, let's be real, that does happen. There are labels that are thrown around, ridiculously willy-nilly in a way that cheapens it. But he genuinely seems to not understand what white nationalism is. And I think, obviously, for any Republican senator right now, you should have a pretty clear understanding that white nationalism is absolutely racist. And I honestly, I think that's what explains this bizarre clip of him saying, listen, if it's racism, I denounce that. Racism is terrible. He's aggressively denouncing racism and then shrugging out of white nationalism. I think he is genuinely confused, and I think that's fairly shameful. It
is interesting that if you get down into the fever swamps of the white nationalism and white supremacy world, you will find all sorts of people who self-identify as white nationalists who say that they are not racist because they are not white supremacists.
Right, exactly.
And they will say, actually, we think Asians are They literally, this is a very common, you'll vouch for me that on the right,
no, he's right.
This is a common thing. I'll say,
well, on the right, so much as super fringe,
whatever you would want to call that. And so I actually thought it was interesting. I'm curious if McConnell was doing some weird code switching there when he was asked about white nationalism and answered about white supremacy.
Right.
Is he whistling to people to say that I know the difference and I'm willing to denounce white supremacy?
Yeah.
But not white nationalism there? As somebody, did you notice that code switch too?
Yeah, I did. And I think it's exactly what Caitlin is getting at with Tuberville. And he comes out, and again, it's this weird thing where he's saying, if it's racist, no, it's bad.
Right.
And this is, again, this is not a charitable defense of him, because I think it's shameful that a Republican senator or any senator would be confused on that level about white nationalism. I just think it's insane. Ryan, though, you're correct. White nationalists will say we're not racists, we're separatists, essentially. We believe that homogenous, sort of ethnically, in ethnic homogeneity, it's always, I would argue, is always pretty racist.
Yeah.
It is baked into the cake of white nationalism.
And I think it also exposes how victimized that element of our politics is becoming, because what they'll often say is that, well, what about black nationalism?
Right.
You often hear that from them. That's if we are racist, isn't that racist?
The answer is yes.
Black nationalism arises from hundreds of years of oppression and a way to try to reclaim an identity into the melting pot of the United States.
When it is predicated on going into the melting pot as opposed to separatism, yes, I agree with that.
That's right. Yeah. But otherwise it could just be separatism.
Right, yeah.
And so that means that these folks are claiming the same amount of oppression. And I think in their hearts,
oh, yeah.
They feel it.
Oh, yeah.
They look around and feel that amount of oppression. And the rest of the world is you guys have lost your mind.
Yeah.
You're not the oppressed class here. Mm-hmm. How did you get to a place where you can justify that feeling despite all of the abundance that is within your reach? But so I think you're right. And I don't think Tommy Tuberville is equipped to kind of discuss it. He then did the incredible version of Some of My Best Friends Are Black. He was asked if he's racist, and he said, I used to be a football coach, and I dealt with more minorities. It's like, dealt with? Like it's like the contempt is seeping through when you say dealt with. Like, you deal with it. Like, deal with? And in one of the interviews, he caught himself after he said dealt with.
Oh, he
and,
did.
And he rephrased it to had the privilege to be around, because he could hear like what had subconsciously, crept into the conscious, had how it sounded to people.
Look,
deal with.
I agree that he's like just fundamentally not equipped to have that conversation at all. But
or maybe he is, and we're hearing his real thoughts, and his real feelings.
If you say that you're denouncing racism and you don't seem to be convinced that white nationalism is racism, but not even with the like potential nuance of a white nationalist who claims that they're also not a racist that you just described,
if he
it's
said,
not like
"Hey, I'm a white nationalist," and blah blah blah, it's like, okay, well, that's terrible and awful.
Yeah.
But you're at least saying that he's. I don't even like.
The last thing I'll say is just it is a very serious problem on the left of inflating the definitions of terms like racism and white nationalism, and that is not an excuse for Tommy Tuberville here, but it is a point about how sometimes like it has allowed people to get confused like this, and I like sincerely, again, I think it is shameful for a United States senator if he is confused and not, genuinely trying to do code switching or whatever. Then, I think it's shameful either way. But I do think that it has caused a lot of confusion in the country. I think it has been because it is sometimes so objectionable, where you have decent people who are being smeared as white nationalists simply because they're conservative. That allows more of this to happen, and I do think it's a really serious problem. I don't think that's an excuse for Tuberville.
And I think a parallel to that, if the left wants help understanding, would be the way that some reflexively pro-Israel forces have weaponized anti-Semitism to the point where they're going to the UN and trying to redefine anti-Semitism as criticism of Israel.
Yes.
Not even doing it in like a kind of just subtle way anymore, but just saying like, no, we are literally redefining it. That if you criticize Israel, that you are anti-Semitic. And so as a result, people on the left have started to take anti-Semitism less seriously than they ought to.
Agree completely.
And you'll see people dipping into genuine anti-Semitism because they feel like that there is no anti-Semitism anymore because it's been so kind of destroyed as a concept by people who've cynically weaponized it. When it's like, no, it's still a real live malign force in the world.
And there are people who criticize the definition of inflation on behalf of the left from the right and do exactly what you're talking about when it comes to Israel.
Yes, they do.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.
Help us build independent news and get the full show every morning at breakingpoints.com.